This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
A couple of years ago, I was disqualified from a position as a contractor for the United States government because I had what was considered a criminal speeding charge. Not a felony conviction, not a criminal record, a criminal speeding charge disqualified me, regardless of my resume, regardless of my background, from being able to make a living in this country. Especially if that living was going to be made working for our government. Here we stand as the GOP prepares to somewhat triumphantly move forward with their nomination for 34-time felon Donald Trump. That's where I want to start my conversation with my brother, my broadcast partner, and the person I probably share the most thoughts about everything with, host of the BIN Daily Podcast, host of the incredible, I try to just come up with every synonym for incredible possible to talk about Civic Cypher, but more so to talk about Ramses Ja. Talk to me, Rams. Today has been a day.
Yeah. Well, when the news broke that Donald Trump was guilty on all 34 counts, I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting that, I knew that the prosecution's, or the defense's strategy, I should say, was to try to stack some folks in the jury who might be convinced, and through some sort of legal loophole, it would be either a mistrial or an acquittal or something like that.
A hung jury.
That's what I was looking for, because they all had to be in agreement. So because I knew of that, I knew that there was a lot of involvement when it came to selecting the jurors. I just kind of expected, this is Donald Trump, the Teflon Don. He gets out of everything. He's never faced consequences, never held accountable. So I figured this would be another one. And then when the news broke, I had to sit with it for several hours. And it's like, okay, well, what does this really mean? And, I came across an article, the article I shared with you from the Washington Post, that I think kind of details what the future looks like. Why don't you start us off with some notes from that Washington Post article?
So I guess the question that most people will ask, I think it might have been the question I asked you via text message as soon as we learned of this surprising verdict. Mm-hmm. And even before I get into the article, I, like you, was surprised at that outcome.
Mm-hmm. I know you were.
But then immediately a cynic.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There was no moment of celebration. There was no, yes, they got him. It was like, okay, what does this mean now? Mm-hmm. All right. So as caught off guard as I was by the jurors being able to reach a unanimous agreement, and for that to be guilty on all counts, my mind immediately went to, okay, so when does he get back on the campaign trail? Like, what is next? And I think that's where everybody is right now. So let's try to give at least a Reader's Digest version of what people can expect moving forward.
Sure.
So New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan will set a sentencing date, which legal experts say is likely to be 2 to 3 months after the verdict.
Now, we know now that, or we've heard that the sentencing date is July 11th, but go ahead, continue.
Which seems expedited. Trump is required to report to the New York City Department of Probation for an interview about his background, his mental health, and the circumstances of his case that will be used to help compile a pre-sentencing report. Ramses, do you expect him to make himself available for said interview?
Honestly, yeah. He's cooperated with the legal process.
I think he cooperated under the idea that there was no way he'd be held accountable for anything. I think now, in protest, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, forget this sham of a justice system.
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, but, I think he's also on the other side of that. He could have learned a lesson that there are consequences. So maybe, we'll see. But go ahead.
Legal experts said they do not expect Merchan to order Trump to be detained while awaiting sentencing. Do you know if that's normal for there to be an option of detention or not? Post-verdict, pre-sentence?
I'll be honest, I'm not the most familiar with legal. I've never been to court for myself. I've never, I'm not super familiar, but from what I understand, based on the context here and other things that I've heard, that that might be something that's up to the judge. So.
Okay, so the question that's in all caps: will Trump go to jail? So the charges against Trump are nonviolent, Class E felonies, the lowest level in New York, and they are punishable by 16 months to 4 years in state prison. Legal experts say it is unlikely that Trump, 77, would be incarcerated given he had not previously been convicted of a crime. Other options for Merchan include sentencing Trump to probation, which would mean he would need approval from a parole officer to travel outside the state. Trump could also be fined or granted a conditional discharge pegged to the requirement that he stay out of further legal trouble, legal experts say.
Now, here's what I'm thinking might happen, and then we'll finish the rest of this. And, we're waiting on more information too, so we're going to keep today's conversation brief, but as we get more information, we'll obviously update this. But my thinking is that this judge has been under attack by Donald Trump for such a long time that may not work in his favor when it comes to sentencing. And plus, Donald Trump has a very long track record of avoiding consequences for his actions. And this judge has been about as tough a judge, fair a judge, I should say, but tough relative to Donald Trump, as he's seen. And so I could definitely see something more drastic happening here than one would normally expect. But all those things you just mentioned were true. It's a first time conviction. It's nonviolent. It's the lowest level felony, etc. Obviously, another question that everyone's asking, and this is to continue from the Washington Post article: can Trump appeal? It says Trump's legal team will have 30 days from the New York verdict to file notice of appeal and 6 months to file the full appeal. Any appeals process would likely extend beyond the November 5th presidential election. Legal experts said it is plausible that an appeals court would agree to stay Trump's sentence until after the appeal is adjudicated. And then finally,
before you move on, can you expound? Having his sentence stayed until after appeal is adjudicated, you know what that means?
From what I understand, it's that they will, if they file the appeal before the sentencing, then there will be no sentencing until the appeal is seen through, I suppose. So again, we're not legal experts. We haven't had time to confer with legal experts. This is just kind of our initial reaction here. But to close out, he's still on trial in other places. So it says Trump is facing 3 other active criminal prosecutions. He faces federal charges in Washington, D.C. for allegedly trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and in Florida for allegedly hoarding classified documents from his presidency and conspiring with aides to cover up his actions. And state prosecutors in Georgia have charged him with election interference as well. So there's still other things out there in Trump's universe. And of course, we're waiting on all of those to come back. But for now, this is for folks who are fans of democracy, is not nothing. You know, this is what he did. Now it has been documented, and we'll continue to watch the story. Any final thoughts before we go?
Well, for better or worse, Republican or Democrat, our elected officials are supposed to be our leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And watching our GOP elected officials react to this, it's very discouraging.
Sure.
Very disheartening. It used to make me angry. Now it just breaks my heart, you know, that they've sold themselves.
Yeah.
Like completely to the order and deity of Donald Trump. He can literally do no wrong. And whenever he does wrong or loses, it was rigged or it's a scam or it's something set up against him somehow. No one just says, man, shame on him.
Yeah.
No one says, man, we thought he was this, but he's shown us over and over that he's not. They double and triple down, and it's a really, really scary time. This is one of those moments rather that I think in some times in the past would have felt like a victory for democracy. But I think it's emboldened and enraged and impassioned or whatever the word is, his followers and his base and his friends and his people who want to use his base to keep themselves employed and in our federal government, rather local and federal. I think people have seen by just aligning themselves with him that there are millions of people that will support them. So for me, as much as it should feel celebratory that there's seems to be some level of accountability here, I can't help but feel like, you know, reading about this appeals process, that he'll figure out a way to wiggle out of it, and that his supporters are more excited, like he's more of a hero to them now. The Law and Order Party is now saying that the criminal justice system is somehow all of a sudden a scam. Now that it's their guy that's having to be held accountable. It's discouraging, man. It's grossly discouraging, and these charges by themselves should disqualify you from being the president. Being found guilty of these charges, you think would have done it.
Oh, certainly.
And
It's true of a speeding ticket.
What, 4 other criminal trials going on at the same time?
Yeah. That's a fair point.
But those who claim to care about us and that are in a position to kind of set up what our life, our day-to-day life is like, seem to be locked arm in arm with this guy. And we see now that there is no such thing in their eyes as accountability for him, or
Sure.
wrong for him, or loss for him.
Sure.
It's all rigged. It's all a scam. It's all set up to somehow unfairly go against their Lord and Savior, Donald Trump.
Well said. Well, we of course don't speak for everyone. Maybe you have some thoughts that we haven't touched on and you'd like to add them. You can do so using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. As always, we're going to continue to monitor this and bring you updates. If you want to have those in real time, you can follow me on social media. I am at Ramses Ja.
I am Q Ward. IAMQWARD.
And until next time, y'all.
Peace.
This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.